The wind came low and long across the prairie, not howling, just there, a presence. It scraped dry grass along the graves like someone sweeping with brittle hands. He stood in front of two crooked wooden markers, sunk deep into the soil. The words had already begun to fade. One name, one cross, the other smaller, unmarked. The earth there seemed to breathe differently. He didn't cry. He hadn't for months. Grief had calcified in his chest like limestone, silent, stubborn. He simply placed a tin cup on the dirt, filled it halfway with water, and walked away without looking back. His boots left dull impressions in the cracked ground, and behind him, the wind stirred dust into ghosts. The town was 30 miles west, 2 days' walk for most, one if you didn't care about your feet. He'd ridden there on a mule that had more ribs than reason left in her, and he came not for conversation or memory, but to trade a rifle. The Springfield had been with him since Tennessee. Took a ball through a Confederate once, clean through. Now, he needed flour more than ghosts. It was a Thursday. Hot. The kind of heat that kept breath stuck behind your teeth. He approached the railroad station just as the afternoon train wheezed away into horizon haze. Its whistle shrieked like some dying animal. Then silence. That's when he saw her. She sat alone on the bench. Wedding dress smudged with engine soot, eyes red like they hadn't stopped crying but refused to drip. Her hands clutched a battered suitcase. Her boots cracked from long wear. Around her, the town moved in lazy loops, children pointing, a drunk laughing too loud. She's still here, a woman whispered nearby. 3 days now. Fella never came. Fat bride, someone else muttered, not kindly. He didn't stop walking until he was directly across from her. Their eyes met. Hers were steel gray, stormbound and proud. She didn't look away. You staring or just stupid? She asked, voice low but steady. He didn't answer. Instead, he sat beside her on the bench, one plank away. Dust settled between them like a moat. She pulled a small crust of bread from her case, tore it in half. Offered him one piece. He eyed it, shook his head. Ain't hungry. You look hungrier than me. He took the bread. Ate it slow. She did the same. What's your name? He asked finally. She shook her head. Not telling. Not till I'm somebody else. You waiting for him? She let the silence sit long enough that he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, I wore this dress from Kansas to Wyoming. Kept it white the whole way. Sat straight on the train so the lace wouldn't crease. Thought it mattered. He didn't know what to say to that. Instead, he asked, you got anywhere to go? She laughed, bitter and short. Where's a fat girl in a wedding dress go, exactly? Saloon? Church? Maybe wait for another train that don't want me. He looked at her. Not the dress. Not the size. Her eyes. How they didn't beg, didn't plead. They dared him to pity her and warned what'd happen if he did. I got land, he said. North of here. Cabins, not much. Mules worse. But it's mine. I need help keeping it. She stared. You offering a job? No. A rescue? No. A pity marriage? He didn't flinch. I'm offering a place to be. You'd have to work. I don't cook. Don't talk much. I've lost things. Maybe too many. You proposing? I'm not kneeling. She considered him. Noted the wear on his hands. The scars that said more than he ever would. I ain't gentle, she said. I don't need gentle, he replied. They sat a long while like that. Wind tugged at her veil, which she hadn't bothered to tie down. A child tossed a rock nearby, and she flinched, just barely. He stood. I'm going now. Sun'll drop in an hour. Mule don't like dark. She didn't move. Then, slowly, she gathered her skirts, adjusted her boots, picked up her case. All right, she said. But you ain't naming me yet. Fair. They walked through town in silence. People stared. One man spat. You sure you want to marry that? Someone shouted. He didn't look back. Just said, already did. They stopped by the local clerk's office, where the law was sleepy and the ink stale. He gave his name. She said nothing. The clerk shrugged and wrote Mrs. before his surname. They signed. No kiss. No witnesses. Just a name and a date on yellowed paper. She looked at the slip as they walked out. You ever gonna ask why I was left? He shook his head. You ever gonna ask what I buried? No. Then we understand each other. The sun dipped low behind them as they crossed the edge of town. Her dress turned gold in the light, hem dragging through dust, veil lifting like smoke. The prairie stretched out ahead, wild, rough, unpromising. She didn't stumble. He didn't look back. And though neither smiled, something in their silence felt less like ending and more like the start of something that couldn't yet be named. The land didn't welcome her, but it didn't fight her either. Dust rolled over the hills like smoke from a distant fire, and as they reached the edge of his property, the woman in the dirty wedding dress took a long breath, as if tasting the place. The cabin stood like a man bracing against time, tilted slightly, roof patched with tin and old prayer. A single fence rail hung loose near the pen. Chickens scattered when they approached, wild-eyed and ragged. He didn't speak as he dismounted. She waited. He tied the mule, walked to the porch, and kicked the door open with the same casual effort someone might use to swat a fly. The hinges squealed. Inside smelled of oil, dried beans, and the long loneliness of a man too proud to grieve out loud. She followed, eyes scanning the single room, cot in the corner, iron stove near the wall, tools stacked in neat rows, untouched rocking chair angled toward the window. "You'll sleep there," he said, nodding toward the cot. "I'll take the floor. I'll make another pallet." "You'll ruin your back," she said, setting down her case without asking permission. He didn't argue. She rolled up her sleeves and got to work like she'd been expected. No ceremony, no thanks. Just a woman claiming ground with her hands. First the stove, flint sparked, flame caught. She boiled water, washed her face, tore her veil into strips, and used them to scrub the counters. He watched from the corner, jaw shifting like something unspoken threatened to break free. She didn't look at him, not once. Just worked. By sundown, the cabin smelled faintly of soap, and the floor was less dirt than wood again. They ate boiled potatoes and silence. Outside, the wind turned cold, the kind that whispers through chinks in the wall and says winter is watching. She sat across from him at the table, sleeves damp, hair tied back in a rough knot. The dress still clung to her like a joke she hadn't laughed at yet. "You don't have to wear it anymore," he said. "I know," she replied. He didn't press. Just leaned back, let the chair creak, stared at the flame in the lamp like it might offer answers. "I'll need to know what you can do," he said eventually. "Cook. Patch. Ride a little. I can shoot. Not good, but straight enough." He nodded. "You ever work land?" "Not this kind. It's cruel," he said. "Harder than people. Doesn't care what you lost." "Neither do I," she said, and met his eyes. That night, the cabin held two kinds of quiet. One was habit. The other was new, heavy, like something listening. She woke early. Before the rooster, before the sky even thought about turning. There was no ceremony to it, just movement, deliberate and firm. By the time he stirred, she had the fire lit, water boiling, bread rising in a dented pan. He sat up, rubbed grit from his face. "You always move like thunder's coming," he said. "I grew up waiting for shoes to drop," she replied. "Drop a lot, did they?" "Enough to keep me light on my feet." He didn't smile, but something in his shoulders relaxed. Over the days, a rhythm grew between them. She patched the roof while he fixed the fence. She cussed loud when her thumb found the hammer, and he chuckled softly, like laughter was a language he'd forgotten but still recognized. She found a rhythm with the mule, too, called her stubborn, fed her dried apple bits. On the third morning, the animal let her braid its mane. He noticed that. Didn't say a word. They spoke in fragments. Shared tools, not stories. But in the evenings, after the work broke their bodies, they'd sit on the porch. She'd sing low and strange, a language he didn't recognize, maybe Dutch, maybe a lullaby, turned sour. "You miss someone?" he asked once. "No," she answered. "Just remember too much." He understood that. One evening, she reached into her suitcase and pulled out a tin badge. Old, dented, worn flat in the middle. "Marshall?" he asked, taking it gently. "My father's. Shot in the back over a poker game. They gave it to me instead of a funeral." He handed it back without ceremony. "You carry it like weight." "I carry everything like weight," she said. There were no more questions after that. The weather turned mean. Rain came fast and sideways. The roof held barely. He moved his bedroll near the stove, and she didn't comment. They both pretended not to notice how her dress, hung by the door, never fully dried. They argued once. Over nails, of all things. He'd organize them by size. She'd rearrange them by purpose. "They're mine," he barked. "They're ours now," she said, sharp as a shovel edge. He left the cabin, took a walk in the rain. When he came back, the nails were still in her order, and beside them sat a plate of stew, still warm. That was apology enough. She never asked about his past, but he gave pieces anyway. Told her about Tennessee, about a child buried too young, and a wife who died quieter than thunder, but louder in memory. She listened without speaking, eyes soft but never pitiful. He noticed she didn't flinch when he said was, only when he said mine. Late one night, she sat near the stove, dress replaced now, with trousers too big and a shirt cinched at the waist. She ran her fingers over the rim of her cup, like she was reading tea leaves. "You ever think about naming the place?" she asked. He looked up. "A name won't change what it is." "No," she agreed. "But it might change what it becomes." He didn't respond, but he didn't argue either. Outside, a coyote yipped once, then vanished into the hush. She stood, set her cup down, and walked to the cot. As she pulled the blanket up to her chin, she said softly, "I'm not who they said I was." "I didn't marry who they said you were," he replied. And for the first time since she arrived, she smiled. Not wide, not pretty, but real. The fire crackled. The storm passed. In the dark, two strangers lay inches apart in separate beds, breathing the same air, holding secrets close. Yet something had shifted, no longer survival, but something quieter, steadier. Not love. Not yet. But the land, listening as it always did, shifted with them, and for the first time in a long while, it didn't resist. The thaw came early that year, but the mud clung stubborn, thick and sucking, like memory. The woman who still hadn't claimed a name stood knee-deep in it, planting onions with calloused hands. Her fingers bled from the chill, but she didn't stop. Across the field, he worked the plow, mule groaning beneath the strain. They didn't speak, but they moved like gears, separate, necessary, turning the same burden forward. By then, the cabin had changed. The second cot remained unspoken, but never moved. Her dress had been folded and packed away, tucked under the floorboards without mention. She wore his old coat now, sleeves rolled and hem trailing behind her like she hadn't yet decided to grow into it. It was on a Tuesday when the knock came. They weren't expecting anyone. No one ever came without reason, and most reasons meant trouble. He opened the door slow, rifle in hand, but low. Two men stood on the porch. One wore a bowler hat too clean for the prairie, the other a duster coat too long. Their boots were polished, their horses restless. Behind them, the wind carried dust that didn't settle. "Morning," said the man in the hat. His voice had a northern lilt. "Chicago, maybe. We're looking for a woman. About your age," he added, glancing at her. "Last seen boarding a train in Kansas, headed west. Wedding dress. Alone." She stepped forward before he could block her. "You from a groom?" she asked. The man smiled, polite and dead. "Let's just say he feels owed. Ran off with his mama's veil, his sister's ring, and a fair chunk of gold intended for their new life." She said nothing, but her fingers tensed near her waist, where a knife stayed hidden behind the coat flap. He spoke then, calm. "There's no one like that here." The man's smile grew thinner. "You sure?" She was said to be unforgettable. The second man, silent until now, stepped down from the porch and walked around to the mule, inspecting saddlebags like it was his right. "Town says you married a stranger," the first man added, brushing imaginary dust from his cuff. "I marry who I choose," he replied. "Convenient," the man said, tipping his hat. "We'll be staying nearby, just in case you remember differently." They left without further word. Dust swallowed their figures as they rode out, but the weight they brought stayed. Inside, she sat down hard, breath shivering through her teeth. "They tracked me," she whispered. He didn't ask if what the men said was true. Didn't care. "You take it?" he asked. She didn't answer, not directly. just stared into the fire. He was mean, she finally said. Hands like vices. Promised me a life, with iron around it. I left before he could lock it. A pause. Took what he owed. He nodded once. Then we hold fast. They'll come back, she said. So let 'em. That night, they buried the gold behind the chicken coop. She held the spade, and he held the lantern, and neither said anything about trust or fear, though both were heavy between them. He didn't ask how much was in the sack. She didn't offer. But when they returned inside, she reached for his coat and hung it beside hers. Equal. Paired. The days that followed were quieter. Tense, like string drawn too tight. He cleaned the rifle twice each morning. She practiced shooting in the hills. Working through the box of shells he handed her without speaking. You miss on purpose, he told her once. I miss, 'cause I was taught never to aim at what you love. You love me. She hesitated. I've not yet decided. Decide quick. Trouble don't wait for feelings. She didn't smile, but the corners of her mouth softened. By the 6th day, the men returned. This time, they didn't knock. They came at dusk, when shadows stretched long and the wind carried heat instead of cold. A third rider had joined them, taller, younger, red around the eyes like he'd been drinking anger all his life. You ready to make amends? The first man asked. She stood behind him now, eyes level, coat buttoned to the throat. Amends are for mistakes. I made a choice. The red-eyed man spat. That ring was my sister's. She was the one who gave it to me, she replied. Give it back, the man hissed. It's gone, she said. Melted it down. Buried the rest. The youngest lunged, but the rifle cocked before he reached the steps. He froze mid-step, eyes locking on the barrel, aimed between his ribs. She stays, the widower said. The man in the hat raised a hand, placating. No need for blood. Just return what's owed. You want something owed? The woman said. How about you tally what a girl's worth when she's slapped for silence and locked in train cars like freight? The air thickened. The land hushed. Even the chickens froze. Then she stepped forward, past the rifle, down the steps until she was face to face with the man who once promised to make her his. Hit me now, she dared. But know this, if I fall, he'll bury 3. The youngest reached for his gun. A shot cracked. His hat flew off, a clean hole punched through the brim, just above the scalp. He froze, hand still hovering over the handle. Next shot don't miss, she said. Silence. Then the man in the hat nodded, slow. We'll ride. But this ain't done. You're right, she replied. Next time, I don't wait to speak. They left again, the 3 shapes swallowed by dusk. She stood on the porch, breath ragged, hands shaking only when out of sight. Inside, he poured her a drink. Whiskey, 2 fingers. Set it on the table. Didn't speak. She joined him. Saturday. Sipped. What happens now, she asked. They might come back, he said. I won't run again. He looked at her, long and deliberate. You don't have to. Outside, the sky burned with stars. Inside, a silence took hold. Not the kind of absence that comes with distance, but the kind that settles in only when something old and broken finally starts to mend. Spring pressed hard into summer. The land cracked open like a wound, thirsty and alive. Corn shot up green and fast, and the mule grew fat on clover. The days stretched longer, and the woman, still unnamed to anyone but him, learned to whistle as she worked. It wasn't cheerful, but it was something, low, drifting tunes that wrapped around the heat like shade. She'd taken to wearing a bandolier now. Not for show, not to invite trouble, but to tell it she'd learned to answer back. He didn't question it. He'd seen the steel in her spine, knew it wasn't new, just finely polished. They built a new fence together. Talked about painting the cabin white someday. She drew a crude blueprint for a chicken coop and asked him to carve her initials into the beam, but then hesitated when she remembered she'd never given him letters to carve. He offered her his knife anyway, said, "Start fresh," and handed her a plank. She stared at it long, then scratched 2 crude marks, simple slashes, one curved, one straight. That was enough. Still, they both knew it wasn't over. One morning, he spotted buzzards circling out by the northern ridge. Too many, too slow. He saddled his horse. She followed, rifle slung low. The smell found them first: burnt leather, sweat, something bitter, like old hate. They crested the ridge and saw the first body, then the second. The man in the bowler hat lay face down, back riddled with holes. The one who spat threats at her lay crumpled over a dry creek bed, mouth frozen mid-curse. But it was the third that caught her breath. Not the red-eyed man. Someone else. Younger. Slim. Barely a beard. Shot clean between the eyes. Pinned to his shirt was a note, written in a jagged scrawl that bled at the corners. Debts paid. We collect interest next. She read it twice, lips pressed flat. He took the note, burned it, without a word. We should leave, she said. Start again, where their blood doesn't soak the dirt. He stared across the open land, jaw tight. We leave now, he said slowly, and they own every step we take. She knew he was right. But fear doesn't yield to truth, it burrows. That night, they made preparations. Loaded bullets, packed flour and lard, filled water skins. She pressed an old rosary into his palm, said nothing when he raised a brow. It was my mother's, she offered, almost shy. She prayed like hell, but believed in worse. They didn't sleep, just waited. Trouble came with the new moon. 3 riders. Black coats. Red scarves. Faces masked. No questions, no calls for parley, just fire. The barn exploded in a sudden burst, wood and ash scattering like birds. He rolled from a porch, pulled her down with him, rifle tucked against his shoulder. She returned fire without hesitation. Her bullets didn't sing, they struck. One rider fell, leg torn open. Another looped wide around the cabin, gun blazing, carving through the siding. She moved like shadow, kicking open a back door, catching the attacker off guard. Her shot hit center chest. He dropped without a sound. But the third came straight for the front. The red-eyed man, unmasked, eyes blazing, hate made flesh. He and the widower met halfway across the yard, both firing. The first shot missed. The second clipped the red-eyed man's side. The third, from her rifle, struck home, straight through his neck. He fell backward, gurgling, choking on rage. She didn't lower the gun until the stillness returned. Not silence. Never silence. Just stillness, like the land had decided to breathe again. The cabin burned slow. Flames lit the porch, devoured the roof. The chickens had scattered. The mule ran. He stood, watching the fire. She stood beside him, empty rifle in her hands. I'll rebuild, he said. She nodded. I'll help. The next morning, they dug graves. 3 holes, no markers. The land took them without question. They packed what little survived, the knife, the rosary, a tin of coffee. She tied her hair back with a frayed piece of veil. He offered her the reins. She looked at him, one brow raised. This your way of proposing? This is my way of saying I'm tired of burying what I care about. She mounted the mule without replying. But when he climbed up beside her, she leaned in and whispered, if we live long enough, maybe we'll deserve peace. He nodded, squinting into the rising sun. They didn't ride fast, didn't run. They rode steady, the prairie yawning ahead, wide and wild. Behind them, smoke curled into the sky like memory, visible but weightless. He reached over, took her hand. She didn't flinch. And for the first time in either of their lives, the road ahead didn't feel like escape. It felt like a beginning.